Ever felt guilty for saying no to extra work, even when drained? Or felt a quiet sting seeing someone confident and carefree? Nietzsche wrote on the Genealogy of Morals to explain those tensions. In 5 minutes, you will grasp his core ideas without jargon. Friedrich Nietzsche lived in 19th century Europe, between revolution and rising mass society. He trained as a classical philologist, then turned cultural critic. He wrote fiercely, often while sick and isolated. Around 1887, he published Genealogy, a sharp investigation into where our moral values come from. He asked a bold question: what if our ideas of good and evil have a history, like slang or fashion trends? Maybe they did not fall from the sky. Maybe groups created them to survive and to gain power. He wanted to know how guilt, conscience, and duty were born. He also asked whether our morals support life and strength or secretly punish them. In other words, he asked who benefits when we call something good. Imagine you work hard, but a flashy colleague gets praise and perks. You feel overlooked. You cannot confront your boss. So you tell yourself, loud and quiet, that humility beats arrogance and restraint beats showiness. You post about kindness beating ambition. This feels noble. This is exactly where Nietzsche looks. This means concretely, values can flip when the powerless need relief and a story that redeems their pain. Nietzsche calls this a moral reversal. Originally, good meant noble, strong, joyful, able to act. The elite called themselves good and called common, fearful behavior bad. Then came ressentiment, a deep, lasting resentment that cannot strike back directly. It invents a new moral scoreboard. Strong becomes evil, weak becomes good. Patience and meekness gain halos. He traces this shift in language and customs like tracking a word's earlier use. In other words, our conscience often carries the marks of old power struggles. Here is the twist. Society tames us. Drives that once aimed outward turn inward. We herd our own instincts like a jailer. Nietzsche calls this bad conscience. It hurts, yet it also creates depth, art, and promise-keeping. The ascetic ideal then tells suffering people that self-denial is highest. Fasting, guilt, and duty become meaning. For example, you overwork, feel empty, then call the emptiness virtue. That story soothes, but it can also shrink life. Ressentiment means stuck anger that cannot act, so it rewrites values to win by judging. Think of scrolling social media, feeling envy, then declaring success shallow and toxic. You cannot match or confront, so you moralize. This gives relief and status points without risk. In other words, the scoreboard changes because acting feels impossible. Master and slave morality name two ways of valuing. Master morality celebrates energy, excellence, pride, and gratitude. Slave morality prizes safety, equality, patience, and pity. Imagine two workplace cultures. One rewards bold experiments and takes blame cleanly. The other rewards cautious compliance and public displays of care. Neither is pure evil, but each shapes which talents grow. Bad conscience is aggression turned inward, policing yourself. The ascetic ideal is the story that self-denial is holy. Picture your fitness tracker screaming to close rings. You ignore pleasure because streaks feel like purity. You refuse rest and call it moral. This builds discipline, yet it can slowly teach you to fear joy. How does this help today? Start with your personal choices. When you feel guilt for resting, ask whose story that guilt serves. This means, concretely, check whether your values help you grow or only keep you small. For modern dilemmas, consider social media outrage cycles. Are you building change or rehearsing ressentiment? With AI ethics, ask who benefits from calling certain uses good or evil. Is safety protecting people or protecting market power? In relationships and careers, notice when pity replaces respect. For example, you keep an underperformer out of pity, and your whole team grows timid. A common mistake, says Nietzsche, simply glorifies cruelty and domination. That misses his point. He does not preach bullying. He studies how morals grew, then asks whether they support life. He praises strength joined with generosity, creativity, and laughter. For example, a strong leader shields experiments and owns failures. That is not cruelty, that is responsibility. Here's one move to try this week. When you feel sharp moral outrage or heavy guilt, pause and ask two questions. Who gains if this feeling becomes a rule? Does it make me smaller or stronger? Then choose one small action that builds strength without spite. Nietzsche's genealogy invites you to examine the roots under your moral garden. Pull a weed, plant a value you can stand behind. Start small today. Say yes to one life-affirming act and no to one shrinking habit.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps us create even more free, high-quality content for you.